It's no secret America has severe nicotine addiction. In fact, according to a 2021 study conducted by the National Institutes of Health, 22% of Americans ages 12 or older reported using tobacco products or vaping nicotine in the past 30 days. But how did this happen? And who sells these products? Well, many traditionally point to big tobacco companies or large tobacco conglomerates like Philip Morris, who own cigarette companies like Marlboro, Parliament, and Virginia Slims. However, today, it isn't cigarettes that young Americans are using, but rather vapes. So how do we get from big tobacco cigarettes to vapes? Are the two connected? And what has the government done about it? In order to fully understand the evolution and impact of the tobacco industry on America, we first need to go to the beginning of the story. The origins of tobacco can be traced to the Native Americans. Tobacco is a key part of their culture. It is cultivated the plant and smoked in a pipe for medicinal and ceremonial purposes. Fast forward to 1492. Christopher Columbus docked in the Americas and discovered the strange green leaf, almost worshipped by the natives, called tobacco. He then brought tobacco leaves back with him to Europe. However, most Europeans didn't get their first taste of tobacco until the mid-16th century, when adventurers and diplomats like Francis Jean Nicot, for whom nicotine is named, began to popularize its use. Tobacco made its first appearance in America in 1612. John Rolfe successfully cultivated the first commercial plant near the James River in Jamestown. Tobacco production quickly spread to other parts of the colony, forming the basis of its economy. Jamestown flourished, and the English settlement became permanent. To fuel the growing demand for tobacco, planters turned to the plantation system and its brutal forced labor. Unfortunately, as a result of this, the plantation slavery became commonplace in America. As colonial America grew, tobacco assumed even more significance, especially during the Revolutionary period. It held immense economic value, and the taxation and regulations imposed on it by the British government were a source of discontent among the colonists. As from a protest, tobacco was boycotted and replaced with American-made alternatives. Additionally, tobacco was used as a medium of exchange to fund the war effort. To this point, while tobacco had been an economic force, business had not been fully industrialized yet, but this changes now. In fact, the origins of big tobacco companies can be traced to the Second Industrial Revolution. Tobacco production shifted from small-scale farming to large-scale manufacturing with the advent of new machinery such as the cigarette rolling machine in the 1880s. Tobacco production skyrocketed. The laissez-faire principles of the Gilded Age allowed for the consolidation and formation of big tobacco companies such as American Tobacco Company via vertical integration. Now, to this point, from the 1880s to the 1940s, big tobacco was riding high. No real regulations or health concerns had stagnated their business. However, this all changes in the 1950s. Big tobacco faced a serious problem. New scientific research linked cigarettes with lung cancer, along with a host of other negative side effects. Big tobacco companies had to find a way to refute these findings to keep their companies afloat. This is where the predation of these companies began. After meeting in December of 1953 at the Plaza Hotel in New York City, big tobacco company CEOs pulled the research together and formed the Tobacco Industry Research Committee, or the TIRC. The TIRC aimed to create uncertainty about the negative effects of tobacco use. They did this by creating their own science and research and broadcasting the voices of pro-tobacco scientists. In the 1950s and 60s, tobacco companies bought and sponsored their own TV programs and paid celebrities to appear in ad campaigns. Later, cultural icons like the Marlboro Man lured men with exaggerated fantasies of manliness and independence. Through careful and deliberate advertising, smoking was at an all-time high. While tobacco consumption grew, simultaneously, in the 1950s, began a half-century crusade against cigarettes and the negligence of big tobacco. From 1950 to 1994, over 800 private claims were brought against tobacco companies in state courts across the country. However, only 2 plaintiffs prevailed. Congress in 1965 required that all cigarette packages carry a warning label. In 1970, Congress passed the Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act, banning cigarette ads on TV and the radio. But just 2 years later, Marlboro became the best-selling brand in the world. If this was the case, then what led to the decline of big tobacco companies? Ironically, media ads played a key role in creating the public skepticism needed to bring an end to big tobacco. For example, shortly before lung cancer took his life in 1992, a TV ad ran showing images of the Marlboro Man as a strong and powerful cowboy next to those of him in the hospital bed. Opposition against big tobacco came to fruition in the 1990s. In 1998, big tobacco companies agreed to a $206 billion master settlement with 46 states, the largest settlement in U.S. history. The TIRC was disbanded, and more stringent regulations were placed on tobacco companies, such as requiring new warning labels on packages. In 2009, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit upheld U.S. Judge Gladys Kessler's ruling, which found the tobacco industry guilty of engaging in a decades-long conspiracy to defraud the American public about the health risks of tobacco, ultimately lessening the power of big tobacco lobbyists in Congress. Fewer and fewer people are smoking. According to the CDC, smoking has declined from 20.9% of people in 2005 to 11.5% of Americans in 2021. However, big tobacco companies have not gone away. Since the early 2000s, they've invested in, developed, and marketed newer products, such as e-cigarettes, to secure the industry's future. For example, Imperial Brands, Philip Morris, and British American Tobacco have developed numerous e-cigarette prototypes. E-cigarettes have hooked teens and threatened to renormalize smoking. They were first introduced to the U.S. in 2007 as a method for people to quit smoking, although this claim never had any real evidence to support it. Because e-cigarettes were seen as a treatment option, they were not subject to the same regulations as combustible cigarettes. Ads for these products have been heavily directed at teens. In fact, one 2016 study from the National Institute of Health found that 78% of middle and high school students have been exposed to at least one advertisement. The fun packaging and flavors has also drawn heavy skepticism. In response, the government has moved to instill the same regulations on e-cigarettes as combustible ones. In 2016, Congress passed the Child Nicotine Poisoning Prevention Act, giving the FDA the authority to regulate e-cigarette packaging and prevented the establishment of new products on the market. Since 2016, the FDA has issued more than 8,000 warning letters to retailers for sales to minors. It is clear that tobacco products are deeply intertwined with the American story. From the inception of the nation until today, tobacco products have been abused endlessly. Big tobacco has provided the American people with addictive product after addictive product, only to be continually regulated by the government. However, the war against these products has only just begun. Currently, there are no federal laws to ensure that the labels on e-cigarettes are accurate. Until August of 2018, they didn't even have to include the nicotine concentration on their labels. There is a severe lack of knowledge amongst the American public and even the scientific community about the side effects of e-cigarettes. For example, a recent survey from the Truth Initiative found that 63% of teens didn't even know that Juuls contain nicotine. The long-term effects have yet to be determined, as these products are relatively recent. Additionally, the addition of flavoring and chemicals in e-cigarettes present their own dangers. More attention must be brought to this issue.